A brutal attack left this woman scarred beyond recognition, but her resilience and recovery would lead her to a new life. This is the Katie Piper story. Hey, Meghan.
Hi.
Hi. I'm not sure if you're going to love... Hi. I'm not sure that you're going to love this episode today. This is one of the topics that you are not keen on talking about.
Right. I kind of knew that going in, but luckily I'm feeling really good today, so maybe I can handle it a little bit better than those days where I feel awful.
Well, this episode comes out the Tuesday before Berlina Reconsidered comes out. And these two cases are very similar. I'm not going to give it away for those people who don't know that case. But it's totally random that these cases lined up, because as I was going back and listening to the Berlina episode, and this was many years ago, I actually mentioned Katie Piper.
Oh, okay. I don't remember that, but it makes sense.
Neither do I. I forgot. So Katie Piper was a newer case that I added to my list, and I forgot that I even knew about the case until I went back and listened.
That's interesting.
So regardless, we'll talk a little bit more about the similarities of these cases in our discussion. But in other news, our semester is over.
Well, it's almost over. It's by the time this airs, it's over.
It's very much over for me. No,
it's a wrap
it's over.
For you.
It's a wrap. And yes, by the time this comes out, we'll be done with the semester.
I cannot wait. Exciting. I need a break so bad this semester. This has been by far the hardest semester of my life.
Well, it's not going to get that much easier, because I was just going to remind you that we have a big, new, exciting project that we're working on.
Oh, that's
true.
So
we have to get to that.
Okay.
And you're also going to help me get window treatments. So we have a lot to do.
That's the fun stuff. We're going to go shopping over break, so that's fun. I'm like totally in for that. I can't wait.
And we're not going to talk about how long I've had my temporary blinds. We'll just leave that here.
You're just going to let that lie, okay? Because people might be a little upset to learn about it, but we're doing this.
Yes. All right. Well, enough of the small talk. Let's go ahead and get into today's story.
Okay.
Katie Elizabeth Piper was born on October 12th, 1983 in Andover, Hampshire, England. Her father, David, was a barber, and her mother, Diane, was a teacher. Katie was a middle child of 3 siblings, and they were a very close-knit, loving family. And Katie describes her childhood as idyllic. From a very young age, she recalled loving to dress up. She loved performing, and she thrived on attention. You don't know anyone like this, do you?
I knew you were going to say that.
I know. Nope. I always say that every time we talk about something.
I don't know anyone like that.
No, but I do picture her similar. Like, as a child, you like to do that stuff too, right?
That very much sounds like me, yes.
Yes, okay. And similar to you also, she was very popular in school and got a lot of attention from the boys.
I didn't say I got a lot of attention from boys, but okay, go ahead.
But she was very popular in school. Anyway, when it came time for college, she decided that she wanted to follow in her father's footsteps, and she began studying cosmetology. At first, she lived at home and commuted to school, and this did not stop her from having a very active social life. She had a huge circle of friends, and they would go out a lot. And she was so into her social life that in her 3rd year of college, she decided to move out and get an apartment with a friend. And she loved the independence. I'm sure you remember your first apartment with a friend. It's, it's nothing better.
Nothing better.
No. After graduation, she moved to London for a career as an esthetician. As I think I mentioned, Katie was also very physically attractive, and after much urging from her friends, she started pursuing a career in modeling. And she was pretty successful. She first started out with a few features in magazines and catalogs, and then her big break came in 2006 when she was asked to be a presenter on the reality show called Your Night on TV. I'm assuming you've never heard of this because it was in the UK.
Yeah, I haven't.
Okay. Basically, it took place in nightclubs, and they would interview club goers, and they would kind of set up people. It was kind of like a dating show. I'm pretty sure MTV had something similar. Remember that trailer? Then they would talk to people that were inside places, and they would bring people to the trailer and set them up.
I vaguely remember that.
Okay. Anyway, so this show led to a second job as a presenter on a dating show called The Lounge. She then participated in a reality show. Get this. It was called Smoke Swap, where she quit smoking for 10 days because she was a smoker. And her partner on the show took up smoking for 10 days.
What?
The two of them would keep video diaries and they would go for health checkups. Can you imagine this happening today? This would be the most like unethical reality TV show.
When you said that, I thought of like when we talk about unethical experiments.
Yes.
It sounds like an unethical experiment.
But it just shows how different things, how the
Yes.
times change. But
Yeah.
either way, Katie was doing pretty well. But the downside of this seemingly glamorous life was that Katie got a lot of male attention, and most of it was unwanted. And the attention that she did want never seemed to work out for her.
Mm-hmm.
And then by December of 2007, things were starting to look rough for Katie as far as her professional life. Her gigs started drying up, and she not only found herself financially strapped, but she was also incredibly lonely. After a string of bad dates, she really wanted to just meet a nice guy and settle down.
Mm-hmm.
So when a man named Danny Lynch contacted her through Facebook, which I believe he saw her on TV and then reached out. But regardless, they did have a lot of mutual friends, but she didn't actually know him. But she was intrigued. His profile said he was 28 years old and he was a competitor in mixed martial arts. And she thought he was very cute.
And a lot of people connected on Facebook then. Makes sense.
Oh, yeah. The two went on a date and Katie really liked him. Not only was he good looking, but he acted a little bit shy, almost like a little bit awkward, and she thought that was very sweet. He also showered her with compliments. Over the next week, the two started talking regularly, and Danny called Katie nonstop. He constantly wanted to know where she was and what she was doing.
Red flags.
Red flags, right? And while this was a little strange for Katie, it was also nice to have such constant attention because, again, she was kind of yearning for a connection.
Mm-hmm.
And he would compliment her endlessly. And in less than 2 weeks after their first date, Danny professed his love and suggested that they move in together. But this made Katie start to feel uneasy. Mm-hmm. Danny had gotten really intense really quickly. But Katie said, he had a rough childhood and she was, seeing these red flags. She also noticed that his temper would flare sometimes. He was very jealous. But she liked him and she kind of wanted to help him, this idea of wanting to fix him because he was kind of dealing with some stuff.
You said he had a rough childhood. Are you going to get more into that later?
A little bit from what we know, yeah.
Okay.
Things would come to a head one evening when the two were in a hotel room together. He said some derogatory things to Katie, and when she rejected his sexual advances, he became angry. Now, some sources say she tried to break up with him this evening, but based on her book, she says she had rejected his advances, and that's kind of what started things. He got so angry that he pushed her, and she hit her head so hard on a door frame that she lost consciousness.
Oh, God.
When she came to, Danny was sexually assaulting her as her head was bleeding profusely. Afterwards, he told her that if she told anyone what he had done, he would kill her and her family.
Oh, my goodness. And this is all in a matter of weeks.
Yeah. He proceeded to hold her in the hotel room for 8 hours. And by the time he decided to let her leave, the damage was already done. He had scared Katie so badly that she felt that she couldn't leave the relationship or he would kill her. So unfortunately, his obsessive jealousy and rage continued, where he monitored Katie constantly, always demanding to know where she was and who she was with. And while she felt helpless to do anything but appease him, she knew that this was not the right situation.
Of course.
But little did she know just how quickly he would escalate. On the evening of March 31st, 2008, Danny called Katie and told her that he had sent her an email explaining everything and that he needed her to read it. Her internet was down in her apartment, so she went to a nearby internet cafe to read it. Now, while she was leaving the apartment, she was on the phone with Danny. It's not exactly clear why, but it appears that he wanted to keep her on the phone. Like he was like, I want you to be on the phone with me when you get to the cafe and read this letter that I wrote you.
So is this just a letter explaining all of his behavior? Is that what you mean?
That's pretty much what he was saying to her. Like, I need you to read this. This will help you understand me.
Okay.
So she left her apartment while on the phone with Danny. And as she got into the street, a man in a hoodie approached her and threw a cup of liquid in her face. As the liquid hit her, she figured it was just a random disturbed man who maybe tossed his coffee at her. But within minutes, she felt like she was being burned alive and, quote, melting like a candle. I'm actually shocked that she was lucid throughout this whole ordeal.
Yeah.
She was actually so lucid that she was able to stumble into a nearby cafe and ask for help. And she recalls, people putting water on her, people trying to calm her down. At some point, she did lose consciousness and she woke up in a hospital room attached to a morphine drip. Katie couldn't speak and she couldn't see. Unfortunately, that man that threw the liquid at her, that was not coffee. In fact, it had been industrial grade sulfuric acid. 2 days after the attack, Katie had her first of more than 60 surgeries to help repair the internal and external damage that the acid attack had caused. The next part is a bit graphic, but I do think that sharing it is important because I want us all to understand just how violent and brutal this attack was.
Right.
The acid caused Katie third-degree burns from her face to her chest, along with the burning off of her nose, her eyelids, and half of one of her ears. She had also swallowed some of the acid, which melted parts of her esophagus and disfigured her tongue and her mouth. The acid had also burned through her clothes, disfiguring her arms, hands, and legs. Katie would endure months of painful surgeries and skin grafts to reconstruct her face and to repair her esophagus. Her first of what would be many facial reconstruction surgeries required a 6-hour procedure and 12 days of a medically induced coma.
Oh my goodness.
She was also on a feeding tube, and she experienced extreme hallucinations from the pain medication. Because as you could imagine, she was on the max amount of pain medication allowed, and it was causing her severe side effects. Not to mention the overwhelming emotional and psychological pain that she was in. She lived in constant fear and despair. She thought Danny was going to come to the hospital. She didn't feel safe anywhere. About 2 months later, she regained partial sight in one eye, and she was released from the hospital for a short time to recover. So she would go to her parents' home. She couldn't live alone, and she would be in and out of the hospital to go back for more surgeries.
Right.
Again, she was in constant physical pain, so much so that she said it was unbearable. And she was also severely suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. She would only leave the house to go to her medical treatments, and eventually she started to go to church.
Okay.
But before we talk about Katie and her healing, let's get to the big question here. Who had been responsible for doing such a horrific thing to Katie?
I mean, I assume this is Danny.
Well, as I was reading the book as well, I said it has to be Danny. But remember, she was on the phone with Danny, and as she approached this man, she didn't say that it was Danny. But police had a suspect in custody. Luckily, they had CCTV footage of the man throwing the acid in Katie's face. And this man was not Danny. This man was 20-year-old Stefan Sylvester, and interrogations with police had revealed that he had been contracted to attack Katie by none other than Katie's rapist, Danny Lynch. I have no idea how these two knew each other. There's no clear link that I could find, so perhaps he just hired him. But in all of my sources, I couldn't find information on how these two came to be together.
What's the motive? I'm slightly confused about whether or not this is to kill her or because he feared she was leaving. Do you know?
Well, we'll talk about it in our discussion. I don't think we'll ever fully know. Luckily, Danny was also arrested for the horrendous crime. So it's not that he got away with this, because it was very clear, even before Stefan told the police, it was very clear that Danny was the one who orchestrated this.
Right.
He was on the phone with Katie. He clearly wanted to hear her screams. It was obviously very intentional, very premeditated. Also, he even came to the scene. Danny showed up acting as if he was a concerned boyfriend because he wanted to see the damage. Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh, this is horrible.
While Stefan pled guilty to grievous bodily harm, which in the UK is the most serious type of non-lethal assault, I would say it's comparable to our felony assault charge. And it's essentially serious physical harm inflicted both unlawfully and maliciously. So again, that's what Stefan pled guilty to. Now, what about Danny?
Wait, what's the sentence?
Oh, we'll get there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But Danny put in a not guilty plea for everything except one charge, and that was the bodily harm charge that had to do with the attack in the hotel room. So that's the only thing he would plead to. For everything else, he was headed to trial. And Katie would continue to endure surgery after surgery as they got ready for trial. And the trial happened fairly quickly. It was only 6 months after the brutal attack. Maybe that's because it's the UK and they move quicker, or maybe it was just the serious nature of the crime.
Mm-hmm.
But in March of 2009, the trial began, and Katie's identity was hidden from the media at this point. Now, Katie did have to testify in court. She describes being so scared that she couldn't eat, she couldn't sleep. There was obviously a lot of protection between her and Danny, but she said it was one of the hardest things, she ever had to do. She was convinced he was going to kill her.
Of course she would be, yeah.
And not only did she have to be in the same room as the man who'd caused her so much pain and suffering, but she also had to endure listening to Danny's attorney paint a disgusting picture of her in court. Danny's attorney would go on to say that Katie was the controlling one in the relationship and that she never reported the rape. She got the morning after pill, and these two things suggest that the sex was consensual. So basically this trial, it seemed like it was a joined trial for charges that had to do with the acid attack and with the rape charges. But this is so infuriating, this victim blaming and turning the tables on this poor woman. I mean, she was clearly scared for her life, and they're just attacking her on the stand.
I have to tell you, I think it's a stupid strategy when you have a victim on the stand, especially when you have one who is physically disfigured, because she's sympathetic. And of course she should be. People are going to feel for this woman, and attacking her, they may have thought that was, some brilliant strategy, but I think it was stupid.
You think that was stupid? You want to hear what else they said?
No.
The defense went as far to say that Katie threatened Danny, and that's why he hired Stefan to attack her. Almost like a claim of self-defense in some twisted way.
So stupid.
However, this certainly did not sway a jury. No. And after several days of deliberation, they came back with a guilty verdict on the grievous bodily harm with intent charge. But they were hung on the rape charge.
You gotta be kidding me.
But don't you worry, he was retried on the rape charges, and ultimately he was found guilty of those charges as well.
Good.
So you had asked before about the sentencing. On May 1st, 2009, both men were sentenced. Do you want to take a guess as to these sentences, or what do we think he deserves here? You want to start with Danny?
I think they both deserve life in prison.
Yeah.
There's no absolute. And so no sentence you're going to tell me is going to satisfy what I think they both deserve. I just hope it doesn't horrify me.
I'll first start with the lighter of the two, Stefan, who, physically threw the acid.
Yeah.
He got life with parole possible after, get this, just 6 years.
That makes no sense to me. It really doesn't.
No.
I mean, I understand the possibility of parole, but why fix it at 6 years? That term does not. Okay. Yeah. What did Danny get?
Not much better. So Danny received 2 life sentences. However, he gets the possibility of parole after 16 years.
So I don't like either of the sentences, clearly, but I just hope, it's my sincere hope that they never get parole, and that, this is really a life sentence. That's the best we can hope for.
I can say, though, that although this may seem light by American standards or just standards of fairness in our opinion, this was the maximum sentence allowed under British law. So it's not that the judge was being lenient on them. The judge's hands were tied.
So I understand that. I just don't think that the punishment fits the crime. And like I said, it's the best we can hope for is that these two just don't get paroled.
I want to take a minute and read the judge's remarks.
Okay.
I told you, so we'll talk about all the amazing stuff Katie's doing, but one of the things, she's a brilliant author. So one of the books I read in preparation for today's case, actually, were you going to say book club? You gave me the look.
Well, yeah, because I didn't realize you were reading her memoir. What is it?
Well, she wrote many ones. The one I'm reading out of right now, this was her first one, and it's called Beautifull by Katie Piper. A beautiful girl, an evil man, one inspiring true story of courage. Okay, so the day that they were sentenced, the judge said, now this was also quoted in many news stories. This was a very newsworthy story in the UK. Quote, the victim had a face of pure beauty. You, Danny Lynch, and Stefan Sylvester represent the face of pure evil. Now, I don't know if you picked out anything interesting about what the judge said. I'm going to read more about the judge, but I want to stop here for a minute. Because as Katie points out, the past tense made her heart constrict with anguish. I did have a face of pure beauty, but not anymore.
Yeah, I picked that up.
It's so sad. But I want to go on and just read what the judge says, because I think it's important to it really helps us understand just the harm that these two men did. Quote, the facts of this case are chilling and shocking. You planned and then executed an act of pure, calculated, and deliberate evil. You decided to wreck the victim's life by thrusting a full container of sulfuric acid straight into her face from point-blank range. Her psychological injuries are severe. There's a significant risk of clinical depression with a degree of change of personality and self-harm. However, her tremendous courage is not in doubt, and I feel sure that her fight back to life will start soon. Her desire for justice and her unwavering truthfulness in the face of the most appalling adversity were the clearest examples of the bravery of the human spirit. She impressed both my colleagues and myself enormously. By sharp contrast, you, Danny Lynch, have shown not a hint of remorse, even less of regret. So as the judge says, there was no apology. There was no statement. You know, sometimes the offender will give a statement in court to apologize. Zero remorse, zero apology given by Danny.
Yeah, that part doesn't surprise me. I like what the judge said about surprising even him and his colleagues about, you know, what an incredible survivor she is and her strength. Yep. I did appreciate that part.
And he said all that before she even went on to do the most unbelievable things. We're going to spend a lot of this episode now talking about Katie and what Katie has accomplished. It's unbelievable. So after the sentencing, Katie tried to start moving forward the best she could. Mm-hmm. And she really hit the ground running. In 2009, a documentary was released called Katie, My Beautifull Face. And it was a really big hit. And Katie had a big part in the documentary as well.
So this was released in the UK, I assume? Because I've never heard of it.
Yes, I couldn't find it. I wanted to watch it. I couldn't find it.
Okay.
Katie said after this documentary, she got tons of letters of admiration and support from people all over the world. You know, other survivors, other victims of domestic abuse would reach out to her, and it really made her feel like she was making a difference. That's awesome. She even got a job offer from Simon Cowell.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Well, him I know.
Yeah. So I guess she was at some event, like a fundraiser, and he approached her saying how impressed he was and, you know, invited her to come work with him on one of his many shows.
Very cool.
So because of this documentary, a lot of doors opened for her, and she was being asked to appear on talk shows to talk about her experience. Mm-hmm. And she said it really felt great to be sharing her story because she wanted to help other people. But in her book, she talks about how hard it was because, you know, she herself was a presenter, and, you know, she said that her identity was her beauty. And now, you know, in order to leave the house, she would have to spend hours getting makeup done. And even after getting makeup done, she said she still looked very disfigured. She does talk about finally, you know, dating someone. She met this man named Jonathan at a bar one night, and I think he really helped her regain her confidence because he was an incredible partner to her and, you know, made her feel like she was able to move forward. But for Katie, it didn't just stop at the interviews. In 2011, she officially launched the Katie Piper Foundation. Now, this is a huge foundation, and they support people living with burns and scars by improving rehabilitation services, emotional recovery, and social reintegration.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah, and we'll have a link in our show notes to her foundation because they're doing incredible work. Around this time, she also began giving motivational talks and public speeches on resilience, recovery, and self-acceptance. And you could see these on YouTube. Just put in Katie Piper and you'll see she's an incredible speaker. She also published a book. Again, the book I just read from, one of the primary sources for today's episode. It was published in 2011. And again, it is called Beautifull.
But you said she wrote other books, right?
Oh, yeah, I'll get there.
Okay. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. She keeps very busy. And in 2014, Katie gave birth to her first child and also got married to her longtime partner, a man named Richard Sutton.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And actually that same year, she released a different book called Beautifull Ever After. And this was a focus on life after trauma.
So she's a writer.
Oh, she's a fantastic writer.
I wonder if she knew that she was a writer before at all or had any interest in it. It doesn't sound like it. That's interesting.
It doesn't sound like it, which is why, like most people who are survivors, they talk about how, you know, their purpose, like, you know, post-traumatic growth. Like after you go through something, it brings you to this whole other world that you didn't even know existed. And I think for her, yeah, it was writing and speaking.
Right.
In 2017, Katie gave birth to her second child, and that same year, she was named one of BBC's 100 Women for Inspiring Global Impact.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
Yeah. Oh, but I'm sorry. She also released another book that year called Confidence, The Secret.
Oh my goodness. She's a badass.
Yeah, she's just like churning out stuff. Yeah. In 2019, her foundation partnered with Fairfield Independent Hospital in St. Helens, England, and they opened the first dedicated rehabilitation center for burn victims.
Oh my God, I just got chills.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
And keep in mind, she's doing all this while consistently working as a guest presenter on various TV shows in the UK.
And raising 2 kids.
And raising 2 kids, yes. And all of this led her to get her very own show in 2022 called Katie Piper's Breakfast Show. And this is on ITV in the UK.
Oh my gosh. So we can't see it.
There's clips of it out there on YouTube.
Okay.
But no, unfortunately. Actually, you know what? Do we have Acorn still?
Oh, you know what? I wonder if they do it. We don't have Acorn still, but I wonder if they also host it. Because I'll get Acorn again.
Yeah, I know you loved it.
Acorn, if you're listening, we'd love to work with you again.
Actually, the Reconsidered we're doing on Berlina Wallace later in the week is one of the Acorn-sponsored episodes. Most recently, in 2025, just this year, she released her 4th book. And this is what I'm currently reading. And it's called Still Beautifull: On Age, Beauty, and Owning Your Space. So it's actually about, and it's actually good because I'm aging myself, and it talks about, society's standards of beauty and how that changes as women get older. So I love it. I'm going to give it to you when I'm done. I don't know that you need it. You have pretty good confidence, but I'm giving it to you.
No, I'm aging, and I struggle with I struggle with some of the very same things, and I think that's incredible. I can't believe that she's actually written 4 books amongst everything else she's doing. I had no idea you were going to say she's done this much work.
Well, actually, in 2025, in addition to this new book, in addition to everything else I just said, she also launched a new TV series called Katie Piper's Weekend Escape. And it's a wellness and lifestyle show that's focused on mental health, nature, and self-care.
Well, that I'd like to see. And I want a weekend escape. So
I know. But while Katie was thriving, what happened to the men who hurt her? So remember, we talked about their sentences, but let's give a little update on what else was going on.
Oh, please say that they did not get parole. I'm just going to lose it.
Well, let's go back to 2009, the same year that Katie's documentary had first aired. Danny faced disciplinary action because he was having a relationship with a female guard. And because of this relationship, she snuck him in a cell phone in which he used to comment on one of Katie's pictures on Facebook.
You're kidding.
Yeah, so she said that, one day she saw this message pop up and it was from Danny. And she said, the visceral reaction was almost too overwhelming. And it's because he had this cell phone that he was given.
The good news is, I would say, with a behavioral infraction like that, probably hurt his chances for parole, right?
Well, Danny was eligible for parole last summer in 2024. And I can tell you he had a hearing, or at the very least it was scheduled, but there is no public confirmation as of now, which is late 2025, of whether or not he was granted parole. I'm going to assume he was not, because I think that would have been a news story.
And how long has he been incarcerated? My math is just terrible. So it's 2025. This happened when again? Or when was his trial? I know his trial
2009.
happened.
So he's must have been denied parole because he's been in there for.
Sorry, it was 16 years, and now I remember
you're
you
right.
said 16 years he was eligible, so that's his first parole hearing. And I'm
going
to
no, you're right. That was his first parole hearing.
Yeah, I'm going to assume he was denied too. Better have been.
Yeah, because of not only those disciplinary infractions, but also the heinous nature of the crime, lack of remorse. But Stefan, the one who actually threw the acid, was released in 2018 after serving his minimum term. And this was because apparently he showed appropriate remorse. He took steps in prison to better himself, and he had excellent rapport as an inmate.
I don't care. That's wrong.
I don't care either. But the good news is he was recalled to prison in 2022 for breaching his conditions. The last I read, he was, quote, on the run, which basically he was wanted by police. It sounds like there's a warrant out for his arrest. That's the most I could find on him.
I mean, as long as he didn't harm someone, I'm happy to hear he's recalled to prison. I hope they keep him there. And that's why it wasn't appropriate to release him after 6 years.
I agree. When we turn to the discussion, did the system get it right? We both think the sentence is too light for both of these men. I am pleased that Danny is not back on the streets. I'm hoping that I don't know how long until his next parole hearing, but I'm going to hope he continues to get denied for quite some time.
Forever.
So you asked me earlier, like, what do we know about Danny?
Yeah.
So from what I told you, he's clearly an abuser. There were red flags very early on. But not only is he an abuser, he's also a liar. And he lied to Katie from the beginning. I'm sure you're not surprised to hear that.
No. But what did he lie about specifically?
Yeah. So for one, he was several years older than he told Katie. He had told Katie like 27 or 28, but at the time he was actually 32. I think the bigger lie or omission was the fact that he had a string of prior convictions.
I knew that was coming.
And get this, one of these convictions in which he served 4 years for was for throwing boiling water in a man's face.
A man's face? Oh, my God. So this is his M.O.
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, and so he threw this in the man's face, but then he also broke into a woman's home and assaulted her. So he clearly had a history of violence.
He's a career offender. Please do not, no one parole this man. He is a danger forever.
Yeah. I couldn't find details, but from what I found, Stefan also had a history of violence, but I wasn't able to find his rap sheet or the exact charges. As I mentioned before, I'm really curious about how much he was paid. What was his motivation in this? If it was a large sum of money, either way, obviously he's not someone that should be walking the streets in society, but I would really like to understand a little bit more about Stefan, and I just don't have the information.
I'm sure he has a history of violence because I don't think you start with that extreme act of violence.
Unless, the only other thing, I would agree with you, but if he is someone who is heavily addicted to substances and he was offered drugs or money that he needed for his survival, then maybe it was his first. Maybe his last if he detoxed in prison. Who knows? But either way, it's not great.
So I understand that Danny has a background of violence, and that did not surprise me at all. But you mentioned briefly a rough childhood. Is there any information about his childhood that you could find?
No, and that was a self-proclaimed rough childhood. So it's possible he was using that as a way to garner sympathy from his victim.
Okay.
I'm not doubting that he maybe had some trauma, but that hasn't been substantiated.
Okay.
Now, the Berlina episode that I keep referencing that will be the Reconsidered that comes out later this week on Friday. Right. In that episode, I included many updated statistics on these types of attacks. So instead of being redundant, I'm just going to have you all listen to that episode if you're interested in knowing more about these acid attacks and whether or not they are trending in the right direction. So make sure you listen to Friday's episode of Reconsidered on the Berlina Wallace case. That also was, again, from the UK as well. And these cases tend to over-index in the UK as compared to the US, which is interesting.
Why is that?
I think it could have to do, and this is just me hypothesizing, I'm curious what you think, but the fact that firearms are not as readily available. So people in the UK maybe have to lean on other types of weapons. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts?
I do remember we discussed this, I think, in the Berlina episode. And I think there is a relationship between the lack of firearms. But beyond that, I have no idea.
It also might be more readily available. The laws have changed, as we'll talk about in that Reconsidered episode. Okay. But I do believe that it was a little easier to get your hands on some of these corrosive substances than it is here. But as I mentioned before, I urge you all to check out the Katie Piper Foundation at katiepiperfoundation.org/UK. And also get her books. She's also been on several podcasts that focus on resilience and life after trauma and being a survivor. Her attitude is absolutely incredible. And not to mention either, like, if you can see the injuries in her memoir, the one that I showed you, again, called Beautifull. Anyone wants it? She puts pictures of her transformation in there. Oh. And if you see what she looked like after the attack, and then if you see what she looks like today, it's absolutely incredible. She was also one of the first people to receive certain reconstructive facial surgeries. And she's absolutely gorgeous. She was gorgeous before. She still is gorgeous. And it's just incredible the way she has physically, but more importantly, psychologically and emotionally healed from what was done to her.
Yeah, beautiful from the inside out, right?
Yeah, really. All right. So again, that is in our show notes. Check it out. Before we head out today, we do have a question from a supporter.
Okay.
And I love this question. And I have to tell you that in my class last week, this exact discussion came up. So I'm going to read the question and then I'm going to volunteer to go first.
Okay.
Now, this is from a supporter asking, how much should family circumstance impact sentencing? This is such a good one because on the one hand, we want equality in sentencing because when you have equal, like the equal justice model, when you have no individualized sentences, when, person A does B, they get that. Person C does B, they get the same punishment. It should be the same across the board because then it closes the door to racial bias and discrimination. However, the flip side of that is the value of discretion. We're talking about an example of a case of a mother who stole from a convenience store because her children were hungry. And she stole, say, $25 worth of goods. And the same store, a man who worked on Wall Street did not feel like waiting in line. So he took his items out of pure entitlement. And the question is, should these two people be treated the same? They both stole $25 worth of goods from a store. Right. And this brings up this important conversation of, what do you do here? The problem is allowing discretion becomes a slippery slope. What do you think?
Oh, that was your full answer? You didn't really answer.
Oh, okay. So what?
What's your opinion?
I don't like answering. I like laying it out and letting other people answer the question. But I do think that discretion to a point is good. The problem is when there's an abuse of power in the use of discretion.
Sure. Yeah.
That's where the problem happens. And also discretion is subjective. What you think someone deserves is different than what I think someone deserves. And is that fairness? Is that justice? I'm not sure.
Well, we invest this power in judges, right? We do give them a lot of power. And I like uniformity in sentencing to a degree. However, I do believe that there needs to be some room for some discretion and some individualized justice based on mitigating factors. We account for mitigating and aggravating factors in sentencing. And I think that's appropriate, so long as the sentencing doesn't wind up so disparate that it doesn't make sense anymore. So that would be my answer. Great question.
I do want to take it a step further because the question does say family circumstance. And I think what that's getting at is, women who have children. And should that be considered? That's another discussion that often comes up is if a woman has children, should she be sentenced any differently? Because now you're taking into account the fact that these children will have to go possibly into foster care or maybe be left with a parent who's not as strong of a parent. And this is tricky because now we're getting into the idea, is a life worth more?
Is one person more valuable than another? Yeah, my student in my class this week just asked the same question and gave in the same scenario about a mother.
And what did you come up with?
I said it doesn't seem fair to value one person more than another. However, in the practical considerations, you do have to look at the ripple effect of taking a mother away from a child, that child not having any resources, foster care, the cycle that just perpetuates. So unfortunately, while it's not fair, it's also, if you don't allow for it, you allow a cycle to keep perpetuating that never gets broken.
I understand that, but just to play devil's advocate, what about the mother who was taken from her children, possibly by this person, right? And then this gets us into the conversation of victim impact statements, right? Should someone be sentenced more harshly or less harshly because their victim mattered more to more people? Yeah. I don't think, that's why, none of these questions are straightforward because the implication of allowing, say, discretion in one area, there's a ripple effect. So I love the question. I don't have an answer to it. I would love to hear your opinions. No, but this is why I love teaching this area because that one question takes a whole class period and you hear so many different perspectives. Yeah. And I don't want a question that has an answer. What fun is that?
I mean, come to our AMAs and discuss that with everyone. Whoever asked that one. Great question.
And the last thing I want to do, we got a really nice review. I want to just take a minute to share it because we really appreciate our listeners. Not only do we appreciate your support and you tuning in and watching and sharing and telling friends, but these reviews really make our day. We often screenshot it to each other and it just makes us happy. We spend a lot of time doing this, and when you guys appreciate it, it just makes us so happy. Okay, there's actually a few nice ones, but I'm just going to read this one, okay?
Okay.
I absolutely love you two. One of my top favorite podcasts. I wanted to be a forensic psychologist, but unfortunately it didn't work out. Either way, I am addicted to anything true crime, and I love how you guys explain everything and give your own opinions. Excellent.
Oh, that's so nice.
And I do want to say, you know what? I think that you should go back to school. It doesn't matter how old you are. Do it. Because I don't know this person's circumstance. Maybe there's a reason why she didn't pursue or he didn't pursue forensic psychology. But, it's never too late.
No, a number of our audience members have gone back. We hear from them all the time. So,
yes,
and even if you don't go back to school, you could still be interested in forensic psychology. There's a million different ways to show your interest. So
that is true. All right. Well, as always, thank you so much for listening. Thank you for sending our questions. Thank you for supporting women like Katie Piper and the amazing work that they are doing. And as always, if you have a question, feel free to message us at womenandcrimepodcast.com/contact. But if you are a patron at the Lifer tier, your question will be guaranteed to be read on air. Either way, send us your question and we do randomly pick questions to share. Thank you all so much for listening today, and we will catch you next time on Women and Crime.
Women in Crime is written and hosted by Meghan Sachs and Amy Shlosberg. Our producer is James Varga. Script editing is by Abigail Belcastro. Audio editing is by Siler Burr and Jose Alfonso. And music is by Desert Media. If you enjoy the show, please remember to follow and leave a review. You can also support the show through Patreon, where you can get access to additional ad-free content such as exclusive full-length episodes, lectures, a book club, and virtual happy hours with Meghan and Amy. For more information, visit patreon.com/womenandcrime.
Sources for today's episode include Beautifull by Katie Piper, Still Beautifull by Katie Piper, BBC, The Independent, The Guardian, and katiepiperfoundation.org/UK.